And actually, one of the things in org design is your strategy drives your design. And so the first question I ask clients when I do org design is, what's your strategy? And it probably won't surprise you that the vast majority of the time, people don't have good strategies, if any. And they'll more often than not say, our strategy is to be number one in this industry. And some vaporware statements that are absolutely meaningless and nothing about how you're going to get there and how you're going to differentiate and how you're actually going to win in the marketplace.
Welcome to Chain Reaction, the video podcast for the supply chain and logistics industry. In this podcast, we speak to industry leaders who share their ideas, thoughts, and anecdotes from within the logistics world.
Today on our podcast series, we have Rupert Morrison, who is my former AT colleague from AT Kearney from our consulting days. But after that, he's become a serious entrepreneur. He was a CEO of Concentra and OrgView organizations, and now his latest venture, Arahi, that he's going to talk a little bit about that. And he also is a published author. This is one of his books that he can talk about a little bit. So, Rupert, why don't you just give a little bit more overview of what's, especially the latest book and the career you had.
Great, thanks, Michael, and great to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah, as you said, we were colleagues together back in the day. We had some interesting moments in Hamburg, among other cities.
Indeed,
doing supply chain work and inventory optimization and what have you. So I started off as a generalist management consultant, doing, among other things, supply chain, but also org design and strategy, market entry stuff, and pricing as well. So a broad range of things which didn't really have any red line. The only thing I was probably known for back in the day was data, and being kind of a bit of, I just love data, and I would teach people like consultants Excel and Access and stuff like that. And so I thought, goodness, at one point, like you, I got ambitious. I'm like, am I going to be a management consultant for the rest of my life? And that was a serious contemplation actually for me. But I
know the feeling.
I decided to be brave, and I set up a business which started off as Concentra Analytics. And so we're doing analytical work, so building platforms for clients, that analytical platforms. And within that capability, I raised a little bit of VC money so I could actually build a product, because selling time is not a great business model, really. So I wanted to create leverage and
limiting,
and annuity, and what do you call it? Make money while you sleep. That was
and it's not scalable as well. Yes, yeah,
very not scalable. So lots of fun, but not scalable, and you're always a slave to clients, etc. So so I created a product called OrgView, and OrgView does organization design and workforce planning, and it's really based on a lot of the work I did when I was a management consultant, actually helping supply chain organizations redesign themselves. So we can probably talk about that in some detail and how that connects. But at the highest level, org design is about understanding the work and then the workforce. And that's one of the traps that people think org design is just moving boxes around and who reports to who. And that's really a small part of org design.
That's certainly one of the topics that I thought that we can touch upon today.
So we'll touch on that. And within that, I've written 2 books. I'm a sucker for punishment, as you know. So one's called Data-Driven Organization Design. That was my first book, which is in its 2nd edition. And then Organizational Planning and Analysis, which is really the function that should do org design and workforce planning, that is paired with, in finance, you could have FP&A, financial planning and analysis.
Right.
So the forward-leaning, forward-thinking, scenario modeling, planning element. And finance, 25% of the finance function is FP&A. In terms of cost, and 1 to 0% of the HR function is doing the forward strategic element, which is organizational planning and analysis. So sort of been on a mission to try and improve that and change that. And I raised PE money, sort of significant PE money in 2018. So we raised a minority investment of $63 million.
Right.
And scaled OrgView. It's now I'm still very involved with OrgView. It's very global. The US is by far the biggest market, and so that's great. But with my experience of being PE backed and going through that journey, and having spoken to other people in PE, particularly my co-founder of Arahi, who was at Inflection, we were both like we had this weird little thing, and I don't want to put your listeners off thinking, who's this guy? But for board reporting and value creation, and like really getting obsessive about how to report to a board, and what does a board, how do you structure that? How do you manage that in terms of the data and the KPIs, but also the commentary and the actions, and how you structure that whole process, which should be tied to your, this is going to be a shock, but tied to your strategy. Which presupposes that you have a strategy, which very often organizations don't. And actually, one of the things in org design is your strategy drives your design. And so the first question I ask clients when I do org design is, what's your strategy? And it probably won't surprise you that the vast majority of the time, people don't have good strategies, if any. And they'll more often than not say, our strategy is to be number one in this industry. And some vaporware statements that are absolutely meaningless, and nothing about how you're going to get there and how you're going to differentiate and how you're actually going to win in the marketplace. So that's then led to my third book, which you showed, which is Strategic Value Creation. And that breaks into how to design a strategy, because you design a strategy, and then create a plan. So a plan and a strategy, those are two different things. And then the plan translates into what KPIs and what initiatives, what things do you need to do to then execute that and to achieve, the enterprise value that you're aiming to achieve. So, and Arahi is another tech play, another analytics. So we create board packs, but we also create the plans that go into that. So connecting that dot between what the plan is and the board packs. And interestingly, when we talking to PE firms, also helping PE firms do portfolio management. So this life cycle of an asset from lead through to, nurturing, investing, and managing those portfolios successfully to exit.
I completely understand. It actually sounds quite interesting in the sense that when you know what you need to say to the board, it kind of crystallizes your thinking, and then it reveals that actually you have gaps in this and that and that. So you have to put the strategy. You have to have a clear understanding exactly what you want the business to stand for, what you want the business to be known for, what do you want the business to achieve in the near term and the longer term, and so and that will create a robust, well, we use the word strategy. I mean, it is a very consulting word, but at least it's a very clear understanding. What are we doing, and why are we doing it? And what are we trying to get from it? And
and fundamentally, how are we going to win? Right, whatever marketplace you're in, how do you what's the playing field that you're on? So, and who are you competing against, and how do you win? And a key part is to try and make it so you make competition irrelevant. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're not because if you end up competing on operational excellence and it's being more efficient, it's not a long-term strategy. So that just being more efficient drives greater EBITDA, and that's good. But it has to be more than that.
Absolutely. So this being a supply chain focused podcast, I actually would like to now explore how this thinking can apply particular to the setup that we're in. So we also, as a Flux being the logistics marketplace, it's a two-sided marketplace. So we have a buyers of logistics services that could be an SME manufacturers, retailers, online retailers, which need outsourced logistics to work with outsourced logistics service providers. And on the other side, we have logistics service providers. And given our current kind of market conditions with economies unfortunately slowing down, all the logistics service providers working at the same time on the very, very razor thin margins. So how does that strategic thinking can actually impact the way that people think about their business, organize their business, and drive their business forward?
Yeah, cool. So where should we start? Do you want to start with the org design
Yeah, we can start with the kind of the overall strategy. Kind of what does it mean? What does the strategy mean? Because very often you work with either on the startup side of things, you work with, I don't know, Gen Zs that may not know, they know the word but they don't know what it means, kind of, or what's behind it, or
Yeah.
in the in the logistics and the service provider space. Very often people are so fixated on firefighting that they don't have the time just to kind of raise their head and think a little bit strategically, and
Yeah.
it does require a bit of strategic thinking. So how
Yeah.
would you you can take on either side of this
Sure.
of this
I mean,
and
let's just
say,
start with, I mean, everything starts with strategy. So,
yeah,
I mean, in its simplest form, strategy is knowing where you're playing and knowing how you're winning, right? So that if you can answer those questions, and then that then breaks down into understanding your ambition. So what do what is your, because if you don't understand your ambition, then within that, the purpose as well as and then what are the capabilities you need to create? And it's a set of capabilities, it's a system of capabilities, which is the value chain that's going to help you execute on that. So if you think about any great business, they have unique set of capabilities, and the combination of those capabilities and the value that you create for your customer, and what is the unique value that you're creating that no one else is creating versus your competitors. So if you can distill what the value is that you're creating and the capabilities that you have to create that, and then when it comes to that capability, there's always a question about buy versus build. What do you have internal? What do you have external? How can you leverage suppliers in the broader sense to configure? And what is core, and for what you have to own in house, and what do you take out?
yeah.
And so these are all really important questions.
I think it's quite
Um,
important, especially for the logistics services, because traditional logistics and its core, it's a commoditized service offering. Almost like anybody can move a parcel or a pallet or store goods, but like, what do you add on top of it?
yeah,
What can you provide that others either cannot or they cannot as well as you are?
there's a whole range of things though, because you have, you know, response time, flexibility,
Yeah.
um, OTIF rates and things like that, line fill. So what is it that you're doing? Are you competing on speed, getting something quickly? Are you competing on cost, getting something from A to B more cost effectively? And are you competing on scale? Are you competing on the types of things that you're moving? Not all things are the same, right? Some need to be um, you
Yep.
know frozen, for instance, and and then in that, think about like a friend of mine does heart transplants.
Hmm.
So if you're moving a heart, someone's had an accident somewhere in Europe, you need to get the heart to the hospital and into the potential patient really, really quickly, and it's got to be frozen so that's a logistics problem and speed, and you never know when someone's going to have an accident, when a heart's going to be available.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's thinking about more broadly rather than just shipping.
Well,
And
yeah.
you go,
That's because you mentioned in your book is you talk about the value factors and how the value factors translate into the KPIs, and then
yeah,
KPIs allow you to translate your thinking into strategy. So could
yeah,
you maybe explore a little bit on
sure.
that?
So the value factors are, from the customer's perspective, what is it that they value about the service that you're providing? And how good are you? So what is the weighting of that? So how important is it? And how good are you versus the competition?
Right.
And it's not just looking at one value factor on its own, it's looking at the group of them. So being clear about, these are the value factors that are most important for our segment that we're selling to. And it's the combination. And what you're trying to do, and it's Blue Ocean was a book that was written that's quite
Yep, I've
famous.
read that one.
You,
Yes.
you're trying to make it so that you're in blue ocean. So you're not in the red ocean where you're just competing on the same value factors. Because if you're competing on the same value factors against someone else, the only thing that becomes relevant is price. The only way to win is price. And I don't regard price as value factor on the same axis like they do in the Blue Ocean book. I like to see it as a,
Yeah.
an X and Y where, on the Y-axis is price, and on the X is the weighted average value score that you have. I call it a wave on those value factors, because then you can start to map it. And there's a thing about strategy and thinking is about visualization, and getting everything on one page is another thing. So getting something on one page and visualized, so you can start to see how are we winning. And if you've got the same wave score, which is, you're competing on the same, the only place to go is creating differentiation or being operationally more effective, which means cheaper.
Yeah.
And you can get that through scale, or you can get that through investment in technology, and you have to find a mechanism. But the trick is to do something that's your end customers desire, that you can deliver more effectively than someone else. And thinking that through, and it's not that difficult. I think, you use the word, strategy being a consulting thing. And I think often these things get overcomplicated.
For no reason. Yes.
No reason. Maybe it's just a way to charge higher fees, but it's like, just list out what value are you providing, and just say how good are we objectively, and it's quite a quick thing to do, and then say where are we today and where do we need to get to, and that's where, if you look at your current setup, you might say, what are the things that we should stop doing? Like there might be value factors that are just not that important, and you should stop doing because it costs money to deliver them.
Right.
So what are you going? So I think it's always important to say, what are we going to stop or reduce? People always are adding more, and it's important to say, what are we not versus what are we, right? And then which do you keep the same, and which do you want to enhance or add new? And so then that starts turning into a plan.
Absolutely.
And the plan, again, distilling that down to one page, and maybe we can bring up, and you know me, Mike, I love inventing words and acronyms and everything else. So, so this one is called the Pope, which is a 4-letter acronym.
That's very interesting, and I think if you can kind of give maybe kind of practical tips, because specifically in the logistics business, very often it is vanilla. It could be seen as a vanilla service without the kind of the substantial value add, so it becomes a price-driven conversation, which end up being a race to the bottom. And that's a trap that many try to escape but have trouble getting at. So if you can give at least kind of a high-level framework of how people can approach that, that would be great. Yes.
Yeah. So what for that? So I'll get to the Pope in a second. So if you sit down and actually just speak to your customers, that's a novelty. And just ask them, so what is it that we do that you value the most, and why? And and find a way to get them to weight it. So imagine I had 100 pounds or dollars, and you had to spend it on each of these. Which one would you spend the most on? Maybe you spend 30 on this and 5 on that, or just the mechanism. Another way to do it is, how many more times valuable is this value factor versus that? So you might say, versus OTIF, how important is delivery time? Is that 2 times more important? Is that 4 times? Right? Is it the same? Is it less? So get them to articulate that, and often they might not. So to really have that conversation and do it with your key customers or target customers. If you're going through a sales process, an RFP process, what are the things that your customers are valuing the most and focus on the most? And in negotiating, ask, get them to articulate that, which from our sourcing days, like that's the most important thing, is like, what is really important to us? So help the customer understand it, but also you understand genuinely what value is most important, and map it out. And one of the traps is too many value factors. And so if you have more than 10 value factors, you are probably deluding yourself, and you're probably in trouble. Yeah. So, you want to get it down to a small list of the most critical things, and then ask, what are the top 3?
3 or 5, and that's it. Yeah.
What are the ones that are the most different, the combination, okay, that's
Yeah,
really
80
nailed that one.
20. Yeah, which
Always.
20% makes the 80% of the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by getting, and what you will find, by the way, is if different customers answer the weighting in different ways,
Yeah.
by definition, they're a different segment. And that's how you segment customers. You
Mm,
segment based on what they want. So people often say you segment based on demographics like scale or this or that.
yeah.
That's a proxy for trying to understand that. But the real answer is how they value
Yeah.
those different value factors.
You are listening to Chain Reaction. This podcast is brought to you by Phlox, the leading marketplace for the supply chain and logistics industry. Visit phlox.is to find out how you find the perfect supplier or make your services available to prospective buyers. Thanks for tuning in. Now back to the show.
And I think that's quite important. And in logistics world, is absolutely critical to knowing exactly what value, what your customers value the most. That allows you to both to retain the business and or win the business when you get out there. But it's interesting. It's also what I also realized that it's this kind of conversation that they are also very helpful for customers as well, because sometimes they are not 100% clear what they value.
Exactly.
And through
Then
that exploration, they actually get much more engaged.
and all they'll focus then on is price because it's the only thing they can quantify in an objective way. What is the cost?
Yep.
And if you end up in that battle, then margins go, and
Yeah.
your long term. There'll always be someone who can do it cheaper.
But that's interesting element, because that gets us into kind of the org design and incentive mechanisms. Because quite often, if you have logistics professionals on the buyer side, on the shipper vendor, you get the procurement related kind of colleagues that are looking at the price, because that is the determinant of their potential, I don't know, bonus or success rate within the
Yep.
organization. So they tend to sacrifice potentially some other elements, the operational elements, and so the organizational structure and the way that the mechanisms and the processes work become quite critical as well. So can we add and explore a little bit on the org side of
Sure.
things as well?
So I mean, yes, but it's also just the data. So if what is the cost of OTIF? So if you don't
Yeah.
get it in full or line full, if that means higher lead time, that means greater risk, that means more inventory, that means more cost, right? So sometimes it's just about helping the organization understand the true cost of everything, as opposed to just the cost of, the shipping cost of a pallet, right? Because there's a broader, the greater the reliability, the greater, the smaller the lead time, the less inventory that it feeds in, right? It might go down to OEE measures like, factory uptime. So if the goods don't arrive there, then you might have downtime. Well, the cost of that is massive.
Absolutely.
So, so it's understanding that holistically, and in org design, it's also understanding what are you trying to achieve. So what are the objectives, and then you should then reward based on what's controllable. And reward is a very dangerous driver of bad behavior, and often oversimplified. And if you just measure one thing and bonus on that and reward on that, you're gonna get that one thing, and it means you're not thinking in a systems view, and it's going to cost you. So most of life doesn't come down to just one number and one thing.
Yeah.
And so that's very dangerous. And then the other thing from an org design perspective is, once you understand the strategy, then what is the value chain? And then within that, how does the work break down? And then design around the work and the capabilities and the competencies for roles to do that work. So that supply chain thinking is actually applied to how you think about doing org design.
Yeah.
And one of the big mistakes that people make in org design is they see the org chart and who reports to who, so reporting lines, as the org design.
Yeah.
And then they end up just on a back of a fag packet changing it and designing around people, and you end up in a terrible place. So if there's
Yeah.
one takeaway, I say it's what's in the box that counts, not where the box sits. And what I mean by in the box is, what are the accountabilities? What are the competencies required? The skills, and then what kind of person can fulfill that and do that work? What are the handoffs? One person's input is someone else's output. So designing for the interfaces and being clear about decision-making rights and things like that are really important.
Yeah.
And trying to get, repeatable decisions that are irreversible, trying to get the approvals down as low as possible. So in org design, you're designing not just who's responsible for doing what, you're designing who approves what decisions and decision rights.
Yeah, and it's
you
a
also
freedom of
design
decision making. Yeah.
who does that. So I call that RAD, who's responsible, who's approving, and who's doing.
Right.
And which is different to RACI, which a lot of people might know, which is I really
responsible,
dislike.
accountable. Yeah.
What's the difference between responsible and accountable? It's confused. And the person responsible should know who to consult and inform. You don't need to define that centrally.
Yes.
So, And so that's why I developed OrgView to help people design organizations and think in a systems way and connect all those dots. And again, that if the goal is customer responsiveness and service, then you can map the customer life cycle, because if that's a value factor, and if customer service is important, and the ability to deal with issues and requests, and those moments of truth when things go wrong, that has to be designed in. So you can do it includes all the way through to invoicing and accuracy of invoicing, right? Which is often where relationships get broken down, because these are all customer touch points. And so mapping that out and thinking about who's involved and is there clarity is another example of doing org design and just the way of thinking about this stuff.
But it's interesting. You touched on a couple of points, and I think I just wanted to get. So we both are coming from the tech side of life these days, and actually it's quite interesting, especially with the evolution of AI and the various kind of the cloud computing and cloud technologies and algorithms and all of that. So how does technology help wrap all that thinking or underpin all that thinking, enabling people to actually make faster, more rational, better informed decisions, and enable them to act upon the initially set out thinking?
So, I mean, I said to you sort of before we went on air, like all businesses are technology businesses.
Yeah.
Like, since, what happened with the Industrial Revolution was technology. And it started with the steam in the steam engine, right? And that was the AI of the time, and then electricity came, and then computers, and now AI is the latest in a series of big technological shifts. And technology brings opportunity. If you think about Walmart invests more in technology than almost anyone, and they win through that, and how they synchronize their supply chain, and this investing. There was an article in The Economist just last week about how much they're investing in tech to get ahead and leverage their physical footprint of their stores, but with dropping in a way to compete with Amazon. And it's through. So Walmart is a technology company. Think about airlines and the impact of the whole process of ticketing and everything else. It used to be a physical printed ticket. Southwest made the invoice, the ticket that cost a couple of million to do, and improve the process. That's technology. So technology is involved in so many facets. We don't even see it anymore. And with new technology comes opportunities and threats. So
I think what I'm also coming from is, how do you apply that thinking when you kind of scale down on the organizational level? So yes, the kind of the organizations that you talked about, which have kind of deep pockets and resource bench that I can invest in this, but it's good for them maybe. But how, like, let's say if it's a small logistics business with 5 trucks in a shed, or a small jam jar manufacturer, or the microbrewery that does IPA for like 20 pallets a week. And
what's exciting is with technology, it's being democratized. So, SaaS companies, software as a service,
Yeah.
Scales down and has pricing for all points. And so thinking about, so it becomes very cheap. Like when I started Concentra Analytics in
Yep.
2008, I mean, we had to spend, like, for us, it was a significant cost on servers. And we had servers in our office pumping out heat, and I got my air conditioning strategy totally wrong because I didn't think about it. We had things flying everywhere. And it was really costly, right? And if it overheats, it goes down, and everything goes down. And just simple, you don't need that anymore.
Yep.
Everything's in the cloud, and so it's much cheaper. And so it's a fraction of the cost now to start up a business and to get access to this technology than what it used to be. AI is, my software developers are probably 2x more productive now than what they were 2 years ago.
I would say three
You know,
more X
well,
productive. It's like almost you double or
it's
triple your
insane.
team. Yeah.
It's insane, and so being smart in how you leverage that. I was people do what competitor analysis used to go onto websites and review and everything else. People just use AI now just to build packs of competitor analysis. It's like it's just insane what you can do, and how the sort of the leverage you can get. So it's educating yourself on
Yeah.
this, or getting people around you who, and then thinking architecturally what makes sense for my business.
I would probably say in a similar way that if the strategy defines, kind of what you do, and that translates into the thinking of how you want to design and define organization, what it does,
Yeah,
the same way it can design and help you define what is the technological foundation I need to have to enable all that.
yeah,
How can I enable my organization to do what they're supposed to do?
yeah,
How can I enable my all the KPIs and tracking and management and performance and agility elements to deliver and being robust from all of the possible, I don't know, CRM, supply chains, finance, any elements. So that kind of comprehensive thinking without gaps is actually quite critical as
yeah.
well.
The way I think of capability is three. I mean, rule of three is another thing. Like,
Yeah.
people only remember three things. So, so rule of three. Capabilities are broken down into three things: systems, processes, and people.
Yeah.
And people have a set of skills and competencies. So that's what your capability is what systems do you need, what processes. Well, process first, systems and people, and leveraging systems to automate and make people, the operational work that they're doing, take that away is part of that trade-off and thought process, right? What can we automate? That gives scalability, and it gives responsiveness is always on, and a competitive advantage from that perspective. So
Indeed.
and it's just thinking that through and going through that journey. And then, so I'll go back to the Pope. So what the Pope does, you say, where are we today? So you have the swim lanes of your business. The example that we're showing up on the screen is an example from a SaaS business. So, so it doesn't quite apply to your audience, but I always put customers at the top. And what are so you got, like, how many do you have? What's the net promoter score? Gross revenue retention is what proportion, how much revenue that you had a year ago do you have today from those customers? Because you want to keep them. But then, in supply chain, you can have other metrics. So here you've got CAC, which is customer acquisition cost. How much it costs to get a pound of value? So how efficient is your sales and marketing? Obviously, you would have other metrics like, what's your OTIF and line fill, and other supply chain metrics. The key ones: people, employee satisfaction, churn. I've got what percent of time do they spend on doing manual work, right? That can be a really interesting metric, because that's about automating that and working that through. And then, your finance. So, cash conversion is a really important metric, like from EBITDA to how does your EBITDA flow to cash? And people don't spend enough time thinking about that, and how cash, but also what is G&A as a percent of revenue. So here are examples of KPIs. The thing about this is it's on one page. This is not every single measure that's important. that people forget that the K in KPI is key. um, and so it's getting stuff onto one page. And so then you say, where are we today? And where do we want to be in, say, 5 years' time, or at a landmark? And then I like to have two, I call them stepping stones. So two moments in time that we can mark and have a celebration and brand this. So in this example, it's foundations for growth. What are the things we need? So we've got the foundations for growth. In this example, the key strategy is moving to the US. So once we've got that, we're going to move to the US, and then we get ready for exit. And for each swim lane, what are the key initiatives, the key things you need to do that are going to transform your business so you can achieve those numbers? Because the numbers aren't going to happen on their own. And this is not every initiative. It's the key initiatives. It's the ones that the board care about, and that if you do these things, we will. And one of the traps is people try and do too many things at once.
So many things. Yeah, there is a saying we have. If you try to run after two rabbits, you catch none.
Yeah, that's a great saying. Is that a Russian saying?
It is a Russian saying, yes.
I didn't know that was a great one. Yeah, don't chase after one rabbit at a time, right? Yeah. And, get the first rabbit and then go for the second one. It's fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you shouldn't have, obviously scale of organization, but if you're a small organization, 3 or 4 initiatives at any one time is, in Arahi, we have a couple, right? We have a couple, and you do that, and it gives a sense of momentum. There's something great about starting, doing, and finishing something.
Yeah.
Perfect. And so then you just, and that then feeds into the board pack, because then those are the measures that the board should be at the top, the CEO should be talking about, and the organization. It's also a communication call about aligning everyone, and you can have sub-popes by function. You can break it down, but at the top of the house. And, those metrics should align as well. The customer ones should align to those value factors. What are the things that your customers care about? And then you should be measuring those, because that's what's going to drive, retention and growth in your customer base.
Okay.
So there we go.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thanks, Rupert. Well, I think we kind of went full circle. We started with board reporting, and kind of why is that important? But actually, it does, because it crystallizes your thinking, and then we touched upon many things. So thanks very much, Rupert, for joining us today. And I think that was very insightful. And I think there's been a lot of takeaway for many in our conversation. And I hope I will have further questions from the audience on this, and I may invite you once again and maybe talk a bit more specifics at some point in the future. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for coming. Thank you, Rupert.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for tuning into Chain Reaction. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please don't forget to subscribe. If you have a story or opinions to share from your sector, we'd love to hear from you. Simply reach out to Chain Reaction or visit flox.is for more information. See you next time.